Lena had always believed that family was the one place where she would find unconditional love and safety, the kind of refuge where storms outside could never reach, where she could finally let her guard down after years of struggle and hardship. When she married David, she was convinced that she had found not just a partner, but an entire support system in his family. A family that laughed together around dinner tables, shared stories on lazy Sunday afternoons, and promised to be there through thick and thin. She imagined a life where her son, Ethan, would grow up surrounded by warmth and stability, with grandparents who would spoil him and cousins who would become lifelong friends. But reality, cruel and unforgiving, shattered those dreams faster than she could ever have anticipated. The moment David left, choosing his own path without her or their son, the facade of love crumbled to dust. Suddenly, Lena was no longer the daughter-in-law they had welcomed. She became an inconvenient reminder of their son's absence, a burden they didn't want to bear. What she had hoped would be a helping hand turned into cold shoulders and whispered criticisms behind her back. The smiles she once took for granted became fake and forced, the embraces distant and fleeting. Every conversation at family gatherings turned into a battlefield of judgment and accusation, with Lena constantly feeling like an outsider in what should have been her home. The sharp words pierced her heart, but she held on for Ethan's sake, telling herself that things would change, that love might find its way back, that blood would eventually mean something. But the bitterness only grew, and with it, the hostility. One evening, after a minor disagreement over money, something as trivial as a misplaced bill spiraled into an avalanche of blame and resentment, Lena found herself cornered in the dimly lit hallway of her former in-laws' house. The voices rose to a crescendo, insults flying like daggers, accusations of laziness and ingratitude hurled without mercy. Her pleas fell on deaf ears as the men of the house, fueled by anger and selfishness, crossed a line no family should ever cross. They shoved her, then struck her, their fists landing harshly on her body, tearing away any last thread of dignity she clung to. Ethan, barely 7, screamed for his mother, his small hands reaching out in terror, but even the boy was not spared. The cruel hands of those who had once vowed to protect them. The violence escalated until it became unbearable, until Lena's world narrowed down to the pain in her ribs, the blood dripping from her split lip, and the desperate hope that somehow this nightmare would end. And when it did, the final blow came. Not just in bruises and scars, but in the cold, merciless act of being thrown out into the dark, unforgiving night, without a word of apology or a shred of compassion. Left on the doorstep with only the clothes on their backs, Lena and Ethan stumbled into the cold embrace of a city that didn't care, its indifferent streets echoing their silent cries. That night, as the wind bit through their thin jackets and the shadows lengthened around them, Lena wrapped her trembling arms around Ethan and whispered promises of safety she wasn't sure she could keep. She had never felt so alone, abandoned by the people who were supposed to be her family, rejected by the very blood that was meant to sustain her. The world had turned its back, and the future stretched ahead, vast and uncertain, filled with fear and despair. But deep inside her, buried beneath the pain and hopelessness, a spark of fierce determination was kindling, because giving up was never an option when a child's life depended on her. Lena's world had shrunk down to a few square feet of hard floor and the shelter's flickering fluorescent lights, a place filled with the echo of restless footsteps, whispered fears, and the muffled cries of strangers who, like her, were caught in the cruel grip of homelessness. Each day began before dawn, with the cold seeping into her bones and the quiet terror of what the night might bring still clinging to her skin. The shelter was no sanctuary. It was a battleground for survival, a place where privacy was non-existent and hope was often buried beneath layers of fatigue and despair. Yet Lena's spirit refused to break. She rose early every morning, clutching Ethan's small hand as they stepped out into the biting chill of the city streets, searching for any crumbs of kindness or opportunity. Every meal they found, whether from a church food pantry, a stranger, or a small cashier who looked away as she took a few extra items, was a victory. Every safe corner they found to rest their weary bodies was a small miracle. Lena took on any job she could find, cleaning houses, washing dishes, scrubbing, floors in dingy restaurants, sometimes working back-to-back shifts with barely enough time to catch her breath. The work was grueling and the pay meager, but every dollar earned was a brick in the foundation of a new life she was determined to build for Ethan. Her body ached, her hands were raw, and her nights were filled with restless sleep punctuated by nightmares of the violence and rejection they had endured. But in her eyes burned a fierce resolve that no hardship could extinguish. She refused to let Ethan see her breaking down. Instead, she shielded him with stories of hope, singing lullabies as they huddled together under thin blankets, creating moments of peace in a chaotic world. Ethan, a bright and resilient boy, smiled when he could, clinging to the fragments of normalcy his mother tried to weave into their days. But the weight of their reality pressed heavily on both of them. Cold days blurred into cold nights, the strain of hunger gnawed at their insides, and the endless uncertainty gnawed at their hearts. They were invisible to most, shadows moving, through a city that bustled past without notice, swallowed up by a system that seemed designed to overlook those who fell through its cracks. Yet Lena held on to a quiet hope, the belief that somewhere beyond this darkness was a future where they could live without fear, where Ethan could play in a backyard instead of an alley, and where she could finally breathe free. But as exhaustion and despair seeped in, Lena faced the agonizing question. Would the world ever offer them a chance to rise, or were they doomed to wander the margins, forgotten and alone? Despite the harshness of their days, Lena's heart refused to surrender, and she vowed silently that no matter how long it took or how hard the fight, she would claw her way out of this abyss, for Ethan, for herself, and for the life they both deserved. The day began like so many others, grey skies pressing down on the city, a relentless drizzle turning streets slick and gloomy, the kind of rain that seeps into your bones and weighs heavy on the heart. Lena wrapped Ethan tightly in her threadbare coat, his small fingers clutching hers as they moved cautiously through the crowded sidewalks, heads bent low against the wet and cold, searching for shelter from the storm that mirrored the turmoil inside her soul. The world around them was a blur of umbrellas and hurried footsteps, faces glazed with their own worries, oblivious to the pair who shuffled past, invisible in their struggle. They had learned to move like ghosts through the city's cracks, always looking over their shoulders, always guarding the fragile hope that this moment might be different. Just as a fresh wave of rain swept down, soaking through their thin layers and sending a shiver through Ethan's slight frame, a sleek black luxury car glided to a stop beside them, its polished surface gleaming despite the drizzle. Lena looked up in surprise, startled by the unexpected intrusion of elegance into their gritty reality. The windows slid down smoothly, revealing the face of a man whose sharp suit and confident demeanor seemed to belong to a different world entirely. His eyes, however, were anything but cold or indifferent. They softened immediately, filled with a quiet kindness that caught Lena off guard. Marcus Reynolds, a billionaire whose name rarely surfaced in tabloids, but whose philanthropic work had changed the lives of many behind the scenes, looked directly at her and Ethan, as if he could see through their ragged clothes and weary faces, into the fierce spirit that burned within them. Without hesitation he spoke, his voice calm but commanding, offering assistance not with pity, but with respect, an offer of sanctuary from the storm they had weathered for so long. Overwhelmed and cautious, Lena hesitated, the weight of years of mistrust and disappointment heavy on her shoulders, but the sincerity in Marcus's gaze was unmistakable. He invited them into the warmth of his car, where the harsh chill of the rain was replaced by a comforting quiet, and in that moment, a seed of hope was planted deep in Lena's heart. Marcus didn't just provide a roof over their heads. He opened doors that Lena had thought forever closed. He connected her with programs that offered stable employment, where her hard work was valued and her dignity restored. He enrolled Ethan in a school where he could finally learn and play without fear, where his laughter could ring free and his future held promise rather than peril. Slowly, the heavy cloud of despair that had hung over them began to dissipate, replaced by a lightness that was almost foreign after so many dark days. Marcus's generosity went beyond charity. It was a lifeline, a chance for Lena to rebuild not just her life, but her sense of self-worth and hope. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Lena allowed herself to imagine a future where pain did not define them, where Ethan's dreams could take flight, and where love and kindness weren't just fleeting moments, but the foundation of every new day. And as the rain finally eased and the city around them seemed to breathe a little easier, Lena knew that this encounter was more than chance. It was the turning point they had been waiting for, the moment their story began to change forever. With Marcus's unwavering support as a steady pillar in the background, Lena embarked on a painstaking journey to rebuild her life brick by brick, each day a testament to her relentless will to rise above the shadows of her past. The first triumph came with securing a stable job, one that didn't just pay the bills but restored her sense of dignity and self-worth, where her skills and determination were recognized and her contributions valued. It was far from easy. The transition from survival mode to stability was marked by countless early mornings and late nights, moments when exhaustion threatened to overwhelm her and doubts whispered insidiously at the edges of her mind. Yet with Ethan's hopeful eyes on her every day, she pressed forward, determined not just to survive but to thrive. Enrolling Ethan in a good school was another milestone, one that symbolized a break from the chaos and a promise of a brighter future. Watching him run across the playground, laughing and making friends without fear or hesitation, filled Lena's heart with a joy she hadn't known in years. The small, cozy apartment they moved into became their sanctuary, where the silence that once screamed loneliness was replaced by the comforting sounds of laughter, bedtime stories and dreams shared between mother and son. Though the physical scars of her past lingered beneath her skin and the emotional wounds ran deep, Lena refused to let them define her or dictate her future. Instead, those scars became the foundation of her strength, the silent reminders of battles fought and won. Inspired by the mercy and kindness she had received, Lena began volunteering at shelters and community centers, offering her time and empathy to others who, like her, had been cast aside by the world. Through this work, she discovered a new purpose, one that transformed her pain into compassion and action, helping break cycles of despair with simple acts of human kindness. Her story, once known only to a handful of strangers in shelters and cold sidewalks, began to spread. Carried on the lips of those she helped and the communities she touched, it became a beacon of resilience and hope, proving that even in the darkest moments, salvation could come from the most unexpected places. Meanwhile, the in-laws who had once rejected and beaten her watched from a distance, powerless and silent, as Lena and Ethan rose beyond their wildest imaginings. The mother who had once been cast out like refuse was now a symbol of unyielding strength, her journey a living testament to the indomitable spirit of a woman who refused to be broken. She had transformed not only her own life, but the lives of those around her, rewriting a narrative that was once written in pain into one of empowerment and triumph. And as Lena stood at the threshold of her new life, surrounded by the warmth of her son's smile and the quiet pride of her achievements, she knew without a doubt that sometimes the greatest miracles come not from chance alone, but from the courage to believe, the strength to fight, and the grace to accept help when it is offered. The future was no longer a place of fear and uncertainty, but a horizon filled with endless possibility, all because one act of kindness had rekindled a fire that no cruelty could ever extinguish.